Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. There's a high avalanche risk right now in parts of BC. We'll hear more in a couple of minutes about that. And the province tries to prevent the exploitation of international students with new rules. How vulnerable are foreign students living in Canada? Are you here studying from another country? What's your experience? We'd like to hear from you on the open line. And a sweet story out of the Kootenays. A Creston beekeeper wins big at the North American Honey Show. We'll bring you that story. And Chef Ned Bell will be here with some recipes for enjoying that sweet honey. You can call us with your favorites. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks so much for joining us on CBC Radio 1. We are live streaming as well on CBC News app, on our website, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And of course, now, starting this week, on CBC Television. You can find us on your local CBC channel. It is 12:07 now. Well, BC broke high temperature records yesterday all over the province. And while we may be getting a break here and there with the rain, there are some risks to be aware of before you head to the great outdoors. Here with more now is Tyson Reddy, an avalanche forecaster with Avalanche Canada, and Sandra Riches is executive director with BC Adventure Smart. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Sandra, thanks very much for joining us. I understand we're still connecting with Tyson from Avalanche Canada. But Sandra, can you tell us about what the risk is right now?
Before anyone goes out at any time of the year, I think the precautions need to be very consistent. And right now, with the warmer temperatures, even though it's winter, the calendar says it is, even though it might feel a little bit different for us. My garden says it's not January. We really want to encourage everyone to still follow the same precautions as you would for all outdoor activities. Trip plan effectively in detail. Talk about that with your group. What does that look like? What are your goals? Let someone know where you're going. Have the training for the activity you're choosing to do and make sure that aligns with the activity in the group and your abilities. That could be mentorship or certification based. And then also take those essentials with you so that when and if there is an emergency, you have essentials to get you through a bit of a bind or a pickle, and you also know what to do in an emergency.
Okay, and we'll go through that, those essentials and what to do in an emergency in just a moment. I understand we do have Tyson Reddy now, an avalanche forecaster with Avalanche Canada. Tyson, welcome to you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And what can you tell us about the latest avalanche conditions around the province?
A bit of a mixed bag, depending on where you're heading out. If people are heading out on the coastal side of the province, avalanche hazard is highest there, with ongoing precipitation and quite high freezing levels. That's the result. And then if you look more at the interior, you'll see quite a bit of considerable hazard on our map. And the driver of hazard there is the high freezing levels as well. However, the snowpack is a little bit more complicated in the interior with several weak layers throughout.
Okay, so that makes a difference. And we've had a fatality reported, of course, in the northeastern part of the province, getting further into the interior. Are people, Sandra just mentioned that this is these warm temperatures and high freezing levels. It's warmer than usual, right? And so are people caught a little bit off guard by what the conditions are, Tyson?
I don't know if people are necessarily caught off guard by the high temperatures. What they may be caught off guard by is it's really tough to assess when weak layers that are buried deeply in the snowpack will become active as a result of those high freezing levels.
Yes, I can imagine. So what impact does that have then on users, backcountry users and people who enjoy the outdoors, Sandra, when the conditions are not as predictable or not as usual as they are for this time of year?
Yeah,
it's a unique winter.
I'll just go to Sandra first and then to you, Tyson. No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a unique winter, there's no question. And Tyson brings up some really valid points. Using the avalanche forecast to plan your activity is key. We work closely with Avalanche Canada throughout the winter as we encourage our consistent messaging of that first T in our 3 Ts, which is trip planning, understanding what those conditions are. And right now they're unique. They're warmer than normal. Understand what your goals are for the group that you're heading out with, the skills and ability, and your objectives for the outing. Maybe it's not to the peak at this time of the winter. Maybe it's only halfway. Maybe it's a completely different route. Maybe it's at a lower elevation. Maybe it's a completely different activity. You have to take all of this into consideration. But really the key ingredient to that is doing this as a group. Those group dynamics are key. Checking that out, researching your route before you go, the activity, and it never hurts to save it for another day or another time when the conditions are better, more advantageous for you. And also that makes it more advantageous for search and rescue volunteers in case they do need to come and help you. It makes it easier for them when you've planned in such detail. Use the resources like Avalanche Canada, reference BC Adventure Smart's webinars, learn a little bit more about where you want to go so that you can reach your destination, and your destination is home.
Right. Absolutely. Tyson, what did you want to add to that? What this means in terms of planning your trip?
Yeah, I think Sandra really covered it quite well. One thing I would perhaps add to the conversation is that when you see high hazard on the map, that's when the decision-making process is generally quite easy. Actually, the message often with high hazard is just to avoid avalanche terrain outright. And so having done an AST course is really important in that scenario to make sure you can reliably identify avalanche terrain. And the decision-making process gets a little bit trickier when you see that considerable rating. Often the considerable rating you'll see on the map when we have weak layers in the snowpack, and managing persistent slab problems and deep persistent slab problems are more challenging than that of large storm slabs, and they involve a bit more uncertainty. And so for folks heading out in the interior where that's a big part of the story, these deeper layers in the snowpack, if you have any uncertainty, you're not sure if you're in one of those areas where that layer is a problem, that type of thing, it's good practice to kind of just default to non-avalanche terrain if you're feeling unsure.
Yeah, that's good advice. Can you tell me more about that training then? Sandra, are you able to tell me more about that training?
There's many levels of training. Tyson brings up the AST, which stands for Avalanche Skills Training. That's a certification-based program offered by providers with Avalanche Canada's curriculum, and it's a 2-day course with some evenings, so that's a little bit more detailed, and it costs X amount of dollars to attend. There's also mentorship, joining groups, skiing, snowshoeing, hiking, micro-spiking with those who are better than you. That mentorship is key. It's also a form of training. You can learn a lot from others. And then also joining our BC Adventure Smart events and webinars. If you head over to the BC Search and Rescue Association's website, bcsara.com, visit the outdoor education section, you'll see webinars and events listed. We have webinars on a weekly and bi-weekly basis all winter long, exposing you to subject matter experts in the field, winter specific. We've had Avalanche Canada come on this week. We have Parks Canada joining us. We talk about those essentials that should be carried. We talk about what to do in an emergency. And we know that in BC, there's 1,500 search and rescue calls a year. So emergencies do happen. So we try to prevent them and avoid them, but also how do we minimize the unavoidables that do happen?
And Tyson, for you, where can people get the latest information then?
Avalanche.ca, right when you land on the homepage, you'll see a map of Western Canada. And from there, you can see the red and the orange colors I'm mentioning that denote high hazard or considerable hazard. And yeah, you can just click on the map wherever you're planning on recreating. It'll bring up the forecast. If you want more detailed information, under the resources tab, there's weather station data, access to the Mountain Information Network, which is a system for sharing information. As a member of the public, forecasters read that info, other members of the public can read it, that type of thing. And then there's also the Avalanche Canada Mountain Weather Forecast found under the Resources tab as well, which will give you a good high-level look at weather in the mountains of Western Canada.
Tyson, thank you very much. Certainly a message to everybody to be careful. And as you say, in certain conditions, perhaps just go another day. Thank you so much to both of you for your time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Tyson Reddy is an avalanche forecaster with Avalanche Canada. Sandra Riches is the executive director with the BC Adventure Smart. It's 12:15, 1:15 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today. BC schools will soon have restrictions on cell phone use in class. The province announced it would work with school districts on policies for classrooms. We got a lot of emails on this. Teresa writes, I'm a private tutor for kids and teens, but lately I've been on more of a therapeutic role. Many of my teen students acknowledge that phones pose a significant distraction, impacting their focus and hindering their learning. Banning technology for teens is rarely successful. Instead, addressing this issue should start within families. Over the years, I've observed a growing emotional and physical distance between parents and kids due to the influence of electronics. Jay writes, I'm a parent who's for a total ban on cell phone use at school unless the teacher okays cell phones for research and is able to monitor the use. My daughter often tells me how she sees kids on their cell phones during class, not listening, but shopping, texting their friends, or cheating. Teachers are not able to teach protocol around phone use. This is something parents need to teach and support teachers with this. Helen writes, I'm a parent of a higher needs student who is in grade 9 and may need her phone for making notes and photos. This may be identified in her support plan, but what about kids that get by with their phones for the same purposes and maybe have anxiety around learning and memory? This is a law 10 years too late. And this would have been more in line when this first started 10 years ago. Thank you for your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca. We're taking your calls in a few minutes, asking how vulnerable are international students living in Canada? Are you here studying from another country? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also email, you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone and email bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, many international students arrive from India, and local groups here hear their concerns. Jindy Singh is the National Director of Khalsa Aid Canada. I spoke with him earlier and I asked him what challenges students face.
Well, the number of cases we have come to us are a multitude across the country and especially here in BC, but they're usually issues around housing, employer exploitation, mental health, and with respect to some of these private colleges, it's trying to get access to classes. Sometimes they're told classes are full, so they're not actually studying, and that impacts their immigration status. So there's a whole host of issues that come to us, and we even have, on many occasions, families phoning us from India that their child has gone missing. They can't get hold of the student, so we have to go out there and work with either the police or other groups to try to find where this student has gone. So the issues are a multitude of issues.
That sounds highly concerning. What have you found out about where the students go?
Sometimes when they've gone missing, it's a mental health issue. It could be also a drug issue, or they just are having difficulties and really don't want to speak to their families back home because they may have failed a class and they're too embarrassed to talk to them, or they've become unhoused, which we find happens a lot here now.
When they come to you, what recourse do they have?
Well, a lot of the recourses they have is we will try to help them ourselves. So we do grocery programs. If they have financial constraints, they have a difficulty with food security, we'll help them from that aspect. But then we find that a lot of the times where sending them to other organizations, experts in mental health, or immigration consultants who are there to help, or just other groups in the medical kind of charitable sector who are there to help them navigate the medical system. So what we find is that they feel very alone and feel like they're left to their own devices. My feeling has always been, some of that responsibility should be taken by the universities and colleges themselves to have these services to ensure that the students don't, fall out of their kind of security network of being protected and looked after.
And so what do you make of the rules that have been introduced by the province?
I think it's a great start. We did meet with the ministry over a year ago. I'll be honest, a lot of us were surprised that the ministry never really got back to us on many of our recommendations. There were little kind of low-lying fruits that could have been dealt with, reduce the MSP. So when the entire province was told, okay, you don't have to pay MSP anymore, that same year they increased it from $450 to $900 for international students. Many of these students are already bringing in billions to our economy, and they're also, working and paying taxes. So, it would have been an easy thing just to say, okay, we'll, reduce it back to $450. That didn't happen, even though they said that the universities and colleges need to be transparent about the fees, which is a great thing. There were still no restrictions. There's a restriction on universities and colleges in how much they can raise fees annually on Canadian students, but there's no restrictions. So these colleges could still raise another, 15-fold, I think, go to UBC, and if you're a student in Canada, it's like $9,000 to do a bachelor's in commerce, by $60,000 for an international student. So there's no limitation set on how much they can keep on increasing annually. And like I said, no kind of wraparound services, and that I think is very important for these students.
What do you hope needs to change, or what do you hope changes?
I think those who are making the most money from international students need to set aside some funds to actually provide them with better services, orientation, acclimatizing to Canada, understanding their rights when they're getting work, understanding their rights with respect to getting medical care. A lot of them are coming from other countries where they don't have the same services, and I think when they arrive here, they just don't know what to do. In some cases, they're too frightened to talk to the police because the police back home, was a lot more aggressive or corrupt, and then showing them that these are the paths you have to take to, get some justice for yourself or get better treatment and be able to, get a better quality education. It's not just about the private colleges, which has also been the focus of the BC government. There's a lot more going on, and my sense is those situations will still continue for a while, and us as grassroots organizations will have to continue working with the students and helping them.
Jindy, very good to speak with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I understand we had some technical issues as we began playing that interview. That was Jindy Singh, the National Director of Khalsa Aid Canada. I spoke with him earlier, and that group is one of local groups here who hear concerns from international students arriving from India. I began by asking him in that interview what challenges students face. We are asking you on the open line, how vulnerable are international students? If you're studying in Canada yourself, what's your experience? And what do you make of these new rules? Will they help? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email to bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guest now is Michelle Turcotte, Executive Director of the Camosun College Student Society. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Michelle. Nice to meet you.
Very good to have you on the program. And what do you hear from international students at Camosun?
International students at Camosun are very concerned about the instability that all these announcements are suddenly bringing. Either not necessarily for themselves because they're figuring out that it doesn't affect them directly, but also for the for their friends and colleagues in their home countries that might also be wanting to study here.
What have been their own experiences with regard to tuition transparency and some of the issues that have been raised by the province?
Well, the tuition transparency is a great first step. I mean, the Camosun College Student Society and our colleagues in the British Columbia Federation of Students have been lobbying actually for a cap on international tuition fees, particularly at public institutions in British Columbia for several years now. But at least having the transparency is at least a step towards that. But we'd ultimately like to see a cap, because domestic tuition is pretty much capped at 2%, and international fees are not. Like international fees at Camosun went up by 3.5% in September, for example.
And what does that tell you? I mean, can you give us a sense of just how much schools and colleges like Camosun have been relying on international students for their funding and their revenue?
It's been going on for many years, but it is the reality of post-secondary education in British Columbia, particularly in the public sector. I mean, the previous governments of British Columbia have actually instructed institutions, particularly colleges, to seek out this source of funding,
recruiting,
to make up for to recruit international students, to make up for the lack of grants, or the grants were frozen and reduced over the years, and so a huge percentage of our institutional budgets are made up by tuition fees now.
And so that has led to the issues that these institutions are facing now. But if we can just go through the details here, some of these rules don't apply to public institutions like Camosun, right? They would apply to new private colleges or universities seeking to recruit international students. The pause for 2 years on approving new institutions. These would be private, higher standards for private degree programs, and as well more inspections. So that would be for private institutions. What about a public institution? Is it about fees?
Well, fees are an important part of, like, we need to keep essentially the institutions need to keep the lights on in British Columbia, like for the colleges particularly, because they have few other revenue sources other than tuition. But it's also about providing a quality, diverse experience for international students. And like at most of the public institutions in British Columbia, I think that's provided in the sense that we have domestic and international students studying together and working together in groups and achieving and everybody achieves a credential that has some value. The problem ultimately is, like, sometimes when you have some bad players in the private sector, I mean, we have 280 private institutions, and across Canada, the number has increased significantly in a rather short number of years. And so they're essentially, international students are being exploited purely for financial gain in those sorts of situations.
What protections do you think are needed then?
Well, we have been calling, both nationally and provincially, we've been calling on governments to take action for years. Now, we really appreciate the fact that both the federal government and the government of British Columbia are now taking action. I mean, we were somewhat surprised by the haste by which that has happened and the lack of consultation that has been involved in some of the decisions that have been made. But these sorts of actions, in terms of regulating the sector to preserve the quality education in Canada and the perception of a quality education in Canada, and that people are getting value for money, have been long overdue.
So you say that there has been no consultation from either the federal government or the BC government with students' associations like yours?
Very little in terms of, like, when the federal government made the announcement last Monday. I mean, we were well aware because we've been pushing the federal government to get involved in the sector, but we were not aware of the actual action that they were going to take. And so we needed, and same with the provincial government has responded to some degree quickly in relation to that federal announcement. And so there's probably little time for consultation, but it would have been nicer to have a broader discussion within the sector, with students and institutions about how to actually do this.
And you mentioned that all these new announcements are creating some uncertainty for international students, wondering perhaps not about their own situations, but others that they know, whom they know, who are
Yes.
hoping to come and study.
I
And
don't think it's helping that. I don't think it's helping. I don't think it would be helping BC institutions recruit students at this point.
And so what do you see as the next step then? What might this do for Canada's international reputation? As you were saying, BC universities and colleges were instructed for years to recruit internationally to make up for those the lack of grants. Where do you see that reputation going now?
Well, I think that the main threat to the reputation is being dealt with by the government in that they're looking at the credentials being provided to private institutions. And so I've always viewed that as a threat because the credentials that are issued by Provincial College and the University of Victoria and the University of British Columbia are widely accepted. Whereas international students who have been studying at some of the private institutions in British Columbia have had troubles getting their credentials respected, at least by employers in many cases. And so that is I view that as the biggest threat to our reputation, because those private institutions and even some of the other public institutions across the country that are in partnerships with private institutions have been working very hard to recruit students from the same regions of the world that we recruit from.
It's certainly something to watch, as you say, what impact these announcements will have moving forward. Thank you so much for your time, Michelle. Great to speak with you.
Thank you.
Take care. Michelle Turcotte is Executive Director of the Camosun College Student Society. It's 12:32 now, 1:32 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. We are live on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. You can find us on YouTube at CBC Vancouver, or you can use the CBC News app. And coming up in our next half hour, we're going to talk about something very sweet, honey. And so some news out of the Kootenays, and a Creston beekeeper really creating a buzz around her honey, their honey. They've gone to a North American competition, an auction, and won some big awards. And we're going to hear more about that story and ask you for your own favorite recipes. Chef Ned Bell will be here with his Can't Wait for That. I'm excited. That's coming up after this CBC News Update with Belle Puri.
Good afternoon. WorkSafe BC is investigating a crane collapse in Surrey at a construction site near 105th Avenue and King George Boulevard. No one was injured. WorkSafe BC has issued a stop use order on the crane and a stop work order in the area. The investigation is ongoing. A toddler was the victim of a deadly collision in the North Okanagan yesterday afternoon. The 2-year-old was struck by a vehicle on rural property off Highway 97 near Falkland. Vernon North Okanagan RCMP say charges are unlikely. BC's Human Rights Commissioner is launching an inquiry into police use of force against racialized minorities and people with mental health issues. The inquiry comes as a result of a 2021 study which found a pattern of discrimination in policing in the province. Data showed that Indigenous, Black and West Asian people were overrepresented in arrests and chargeable incidents. The information was based on an analysis of data from 5 police jurisdictions. Now here's a look at the BC weather along the north coast. Mainly cloudy, a high of 9 degrees. In the Peace region, mainly sunny and up to 13. For the central interior, mainly sunny and 10. In the southeast, an increasing chance of showers through the afternoon, a high of 6. Southern interior, mainly cloudy and 8. And along the south coast, Greater Victoria and Metro Vancouver, cloudy, a chance of showers late this afternoon, a high of 14 degrees. That's the CBC News from Vancouver.
I don't know if you're going back to your desk or if you plan a detour to our studio here. It's looking pretty good.
Is there honey to be had?
There is honey, lots, a couple of bottles, some Dijon mustard, some other accoutrement. And I see meat at the end of the table. So, Belle, if you haven't had lunch, you might want to come mosey on over.
Well, it sounds pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been thinking about honey because we were saying that you were going to have the guest on today, and It just made me think I haven't had any in a nice hot drink for a long
Oh,
time.
yes, like a little chamomile tea with honey.
Or
Oh.
something else.
Or so- We'll leave that to the imagination.
Yes.
Yes, Belle, thank you very much. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
All right.
That's Belle Purée in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Yes, in just a couple of moments, we're going to talk about honey, but we have some emails to share with you as well. Yesterday, we talked about finding ways to stay active without breaking the bank, and we got lots of thoughts. Barbara in Port Coquitlam writes, I've actually just canceled my gym membership this morning, and a big factor was the cost. As much as I love it, and it's not one of the more expensive ones out there, I'm shifting to using my condo gym, which is well equipped and already paid for in my strata fees. I'm determined to stick to my workouts. Zoe writes from Parksville, as a senior on a limited income, I've included as many free fitness activities as possible, like home yoga and stretching, hiking, walking, all part of my toolkit. Thank you very much for your emails. You can reach us, bctoday@cbc.ca. A suggestion from Emma as well is to use Parkrun, which is a free timed 5K run or walk. Go to parkrun.ca. Well, some honey from a Creston beekeeper has won big at the North American Honey Show. Now, my colleague CBC's Chris Walker, host of Daybreak South, spoke with beekeeper Amanda Goodman-Lee about what made their honey find the sweet spot and rise to the top.
What makes your honey so good?
I think it's so good because it's from the Kootenays. In the creamed honey division, they're looking for smoothness, creaminess. They're looking that there's no dust or any little particles or debris in the honey. You submit 4 jars in one show and 3 in the other. There's no labels on it, so it's a blind judging. And they look for fingerprints. They look at the lid. So if you have a little dent in the lid, that'll be a mark off. But most of all, it's the flavor, it's the taste, it's the creaminess. It's got to be smooth, smooth, smooth. It's really the work of the bees, and it's the greatest reward we get when we're beekeeping is at the end of season, when we're extracting that honey and that liquid gold is coming. Our honey will taste different than honey maybe in the Okanagan or the Lower Mainland, but I think it's all the things that combine the love, just the purity, raw honey of it all. Fireweed honey is where there has been a clear cut or a forest fire, and it's sort of the first vegetation that grows up on the mountains. Beekeepers were notorious for keeping our location secret and quiet. Our fireweed, which got a blue ribbon, was auctioned off. The auctioneer was also one of the honey judges, and he said that we got a perfect score on this honey. He hadn't tasted creamed honey like this in over 20 years. In his opinion, and the other judges, that it was the best to get best in show. And as the numbers were going past 250 US, the 3, 4, 5, 6, ended at
What?
650 US a jar.
Come on.
So much your way here, $650.
So when people complain to me if they think my honey prices are high, I'm going to say, not high enough if I can sell it for
Yeah.
$650. There is a real love for the bee. I'm always learning. The bees just teach us to be calm and cool and collected. And the reward is the honey. And it's so wonderful to talk about like the beautiful side of beekeeping.
Amanda Goodman-Lee from Honeybees and Apiaries. That's right. That jar of creamed honey usually sells for under $15, but it sold for $877 Canadian at that special auction earlier this month. Well, we're asking you, what makes a jar of honey so special? What do you think is the best way to eat or cook with honey? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us too, bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me to take your calls is Ned Bell. an executive chef, and among his many titles, a chef ambassador for BC through the province and Ministry of Agriculture. And we've had him on a show before, but what a pleasure to have you in studio.
Hi, Michelle. What a pleasure to be here.
You were in Naramata last time.
That's right. Still sort of part-time Naramata, full-time, or, part-time Vancouver.
Not a bad place to be.
It's a very good, I'm a very fortunate husband, father, and, born in the Okanagan, raised on the coast. So my happy places.
Yeah. Proud Okanagan. Okanaganian?
Okanaganian? Narramation?
Narramation?
Yeah, absolutely. I have an almost $1,000 jar of honey here.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. I mean, kudos to Amanda and Jeff.
Absolutely.
I've been to their apiary and to their home, and I mean, you talk about passion, it just like oozes out of them. They are phenomenal people.
Well, I saw you in that video. What work have you done with them?
Well, my work as chef ambassador for the province and the BC program, I get to travel all over this incredible place that we get to call home from top to bottom, east to west. And I get to celebrate makers, artisans, fishers, farmers, growers, all the things that make our lives delicious. Yeah. And we were up there for the Basin Food Expo. The Columbia River Basin hosts an expo in different towns throughout the Columbia River Basin every year. And so we were invited to go up. And as part of this past year's journey, we landed in Creston. And of course, that's where Amanda and Jeff are.
Ground zero, apparently, for the best honey that one judge had in 20 years.
Wow.
And so can you tell me, Ned, in all of your travels then, it's not easy to be a food producer, a food grower at this time. Costs are rising. What is it that keeps people going?
Passion, commitment, joy, sense of purpose, to celebrate their unique taste of place. They talk about sort of what makes honey unique, or what makes wild BC salmon unique, or wild BC beef, or the dairy here, or, our chicken or our turkey. I mean, cranberries, hazelnuts, like whatever the ingredients might be that's from this place that we get to call home, there's that unique taste of place. And to be a producer is difficult, absolutely. Yeah. Maybe more so now, more difficult now than it has been in the last decade or so. But it's always been difficult. I mean, fishers, risk their lives to go catch fish for us. Mm-hmm. Farmers are up at the crack of dawn and go to the bed after the sun is down, and they are just extraordinary humans, and they make our lives delicious, and we need to celebrate them. And I'm lucky as a chef, I just get to do that every day of my life.
I know. My goodness, what a job. You just had me thinking about peaches from the Okanagan there for a moment.
The best fruit in the world. Actually, that's not true. Cherries are probably the best fruit.
That's true. They are. But there's nothing like
and BC apples and BC blueberries, BC cranberries.
Yes. We're going to get to a call in a moment, but why don't you tell us, speaking of BC grown and made, what is this beautiful array you've got in front of us here?
Well, it's the best way I can make friends, Michelle, is to put tasty things in your belly. And if I do that, you'll like me. So, this time of year, it's, of course, just as easy to eat seasonally and locally as it is at any other time of the year. All you got to do is dig a little deeper. So we've got some caramelized cabbage. I've been listening to CBC. Well, I listen to CBC all day long, every day. But
good for you.
A couple of, maybe it was a show yesterday, Gloria, I think, was talking about cabbage.
Yes, that's right.
And so I brought in some cabbage, caramelized it in some brown butter, from BC cows, toasted some sourdough bread with some Windset Farms hydroponically grown roasted tomatoes.
Oh,
so the dish today is plant-based.
Oh, that's
just
bread. I thought it was pieces of meat.
Yeah, my wife and I love these croutons because we sprinkle lots of vinegar on them after they come out of the oven. So they're sort of like olive oil, in this case, brown butter, rich, but also quite sour and sweet and salty and savory.
Oh, my goodness.
It just makes all the, this is my favorite time of year to cook because it takes a touch more effort, but the flavors are bold and bright and delicious. They're not green and vibrant like spring and summer.
Right.
But there's just so many things you can do with BC fresh vegetables.
I feel it. I feel myself warming up just hearing that. And they're really big pieces as well. Like you get a lot. That's a big crouton.
Well, it's sort of a bread salad. So it's like a panzanella or a bread salad, of course, then with the caramelized cabbage.
Gorgeous.
My absolute favorite, nuts, hazelnuts toasted from Agassiz, of course, the stars of the show, the honey, I call my food globally inspired and locally created, based here in Vancouver, or, whether we're in BC or in Canada. That really is our food here in this country, is the flavors from around the world, the cultures, the people that have come here and left or brought their deliciousness with them. So I've brought miso paste. I have some Canadian grown Dijon mustard. I have some honey, of course, some brown butter, and some apple cider vinegar. And I was going to make a little bit of a vinaigrette.
Yes. Let's do that.
Tasty.
Let's take a call, and then we'll get to our vinaigrette, and anything that you need to set up.
I'm ready to go.
Well,
yeah, I've never cooked on the radio. I've done thousands of episodes on TV, but
this is new to us
excited.
too. So let's do it. Let's hear from Bonnie first of all, because Bonnie wants to sing honey's praises. Hi, Bonnie, joining us from Nelson. Welcome.
Yes, hello. Well, I used to live on a farm in Winlaw, but I was always afraid of bees, and we had a mosquito farm. But one year I decided I was going to use honey in my coffee. And I tried to persuade my friend, and she said, "Oh, I'll never do that." But I use honey in my coffee all the time. I buy local honey all the time. And, I was just saying, I just used to cook all kinds of stuff with honey when I was living on the farm.
Oh, wonderful.
And, I love this stuff. And we have this local honey that comes from local farms here in the Kootenays. And I bought a great big bucket of it. I eat very little. I'm 77 now, and I eat very little, but I always put honey in my coffee, and I love the taste of honey, and it's just I'm drinking it now.
You're drinking the honey.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bonnie, you really did sing its praises. I mean, that was quite melodic there. Ned wants to show us something that he's got as well.
Yeah, so Bonnie, hello. You sound like my Auntie Mary, so your voice brings joy to my...
Could never persuade my neighbors to do it. No, that'll ruin it.
Oh, that's funny.
And all the different honeys are beautiful.
They really are. Honey Bee Zen has this
all the time.
You can try and stop her, but she's got a message. She's got a message.
Well, I was just going to say I have a gift for you, Bonnie. Next time I see you, is Honey Bee Zen puts out these great 3-packs. This one's for tea lovers, and this one's for coffee lovers. And
wow.
I don't know, Michelle, if you want lemon, honey, or lavender, or cinnamon, chocolate, or coffee. Little 3-packs that are pretty great.
I'm such a fan of lavender coffee. I know there's a place nearby that makes lavender lattes, and just delicious. Bonnie, wow. You sure got us started. We're asking you what you love about honey. Are there different kinds of honey that you enjoy? Because as we heard earlier too, depending on what the surroundings the bees have, that will influence the taste of honey. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Honey is a real taste of place. So wherever it is, whether it's on the island, up in Prince George, or in the Kootenays, or in the Okanagan, of course, here in Vancouver, it's going to taste like the place it is. Because, of course, the bees are feeding on the, natural environment around, whether it's fruit trees or wildflowers, or, after, on fireweed after a forest fire. I was thinking about forest fires, as devastating as they are. Mother Nature still brings us joy through, a bunch of delicious things, morel mushrooms and fireweed honey, of course. But this creamed honey that they won their award for.
Oh, is that it?
I have a neat story, if I can tell it briefly. So Jeff joked with me when I was up there that they have quite a fancy machine to cream the honey. So it's about taking their base honey and then slowly creaming it or paddling it at a consistent temperature, and over the course of a period of time, it gets creamed. So it sort of almost emulsifies, if that makes sense.
It looks like it. It's kind of more white and thick. It looks quite thick.
Yeah, exactly. And so Jeff says, that emulsification machine that Amanda told me we were going to get was basically my midlife sports car that I had to give up on. So if you ever go up to Honey Bee Zen, you'll get to see, the cream machine.
The cream machine, that was the that replaced the sports car.
That's
and we'll
right.
see how happy he is about it. I'm
he's
sure
pretty
he's
happy.
quite happy about it.
He's a very passionate guy as well.
All right, shall we get on with our salad here? Okay.
So we're going to make a vinaigrette. So I love vinaigrettes, spring, summer, fall, winter. It's a nice way to add sort of big, bright, bold flavors without a ton of heavy sauces. Right. So what is a vinaigrette? Well, it's an emulsification of some sort of fat The emulsification could come from a number of things. I also brought some tahini, which would work quite nicely. I'm not going to use that today.
Okay.
But we're starting with Canadian Dijon mustard. Then we have some miso paste. I love miso paste. It gives it that sort of salty umami flavor. Of course, we have our BC honey. And there's recipes on my website, nedbell.com, but more importantly, it's about taste. It's about sort of, trying it and adjusting it based on where you might want the flavors to go. Some people are sweeter, some people are saltier,
And I'll just narrate as well. You were just mixing everything up, and now it's all nice and mixed together. You've just put some salt in there.
Yeah, added a little salt. And now, so what I've done is make some brown butter. So you take a pound of butter, you chop it into cubes over about 5 on your stove, so just more than warm. You slowly bubble it, bubble, and you skim off the milk solids. And then what you're left with is clarified butter. Clarified butter is what you would make hollandaise or béarnaise with. Well, this is brown butter. So noisette, a little bit toasted, a little bit, just really savory. And we're going to use this brown butter to make our vinaigrette. This is going to replace. Stir. This is going to replace the oil. So I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, just like so. Just stirring that in. You want to do it in stages so that it stays emulsified, which is important.
Yeah.
If it breaks, no big deal. Like, it's still going to taste the same. But if you want it to be a nice kind of silky, velvety vinaigrette.
And that's what it looks like right now. Really very silky.
Yeah.
Everything's just mixing in together.
And there's
very nice.
Look at that noisette brown butter.
Yeah.
And then we can build a salad at some point, but I'm not sure if we're doing that right now or not.
Yeah, you know what? I'll let you do that. You're doing, I was a little mesmerized by your mixing there for a moment. Let's put out the phone numbers once again. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. We are asking you about your favorite honey. As we heard, honey represents place. It's a taste of place. So is there a part of the province that you love to get honey from? I remember traveling through Merritt with Mark Forsyth, who used to host this show, BC Almanac, and we were driving through and we had to stop at this little barn and bought some honey from Merritt, and it was delicious. I wish I had gotten more, to be honest with you. Some emails now. Scott writes, my wife and I recently went to Wenatchee, Washington for a vacation and had really amazing mead beer from McGregor Farms Honey. My wife's favorite was lavender mead. Yes, I'm such a fan of lavender as well. I would love to hear if there's something similar available in the Lower Mainland. I'm going to ask Ned about that in just a moment. He's busy putting together our lovely salad here. Marnie writes, my favorite is basswood honey. The fragrance seems stronger than the sweetness. Basswood trees are found in southern and central Ontario. However, linden honey is in the same family, and there are many linden trees in BC. Why aren't people making honey from linden blossoms? Another favorite is buckwheat, not from BC, however. Marnie, great to hear from you. And let's head to the Cowichan Valley, and Bill is on the phone. And Bill, you are a beekeeper.
I am. How you doing?
Oh, very well. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And so, why don't you tell us about what you make?
Well, I don't do any baking myself, but my family does, and of course, all we use is honey when it comes to baking. My favorite is just my honey and green tea. Just honey, because it brings out the flavors of the honey, like just blows them up, right? So depending on the season the honey came from, basically gives the different flavors through the green tea. So basically that's my go-to. And I sip on that all day. Yeah, while at work.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, most people would think, Vancouver Island being somewhat tropical and all the flowers that we have, but actually, we're probably one of the areas of Canada that have the least amount of nectar supply for our bees.
Really?
And, the production of honey is way lower than anywhere else in mainland Canada.
So it's challenging for you?
It's hard. It's a little harder. I mean, it's limited. We have our nectar sources, the main one being blackberry. And then, of course, if you have the time and ability, taking it up into the mountain for fireweed. And then, of course, just trickling in of wildflowers, the smaller flowers that they're after.
Yeah.
Is really it on the island.
Wow. And Bill, we heard from Chef Ned Bell earlier. It's passion that pushes people through, local producers through, despite the challenges that you've been talking about. What drives you?
Therapy.
Ah.
I go out every day with my coffee. That's how I start every day. I just got a chair out by my colonies, and I sit there and I have my coffee first thing in the morning, especially during the summer months when it's beautiful out. And, some days they don't want me around as much, but for the most part, they let me sit next to them and, enjoy a coffee. And I don't know, I just sit there and just mesmerized. I'm going on 6 or 7 years, and to this day, still just mesmerized by the whole process.
Yeah, sounds very serene, Bill.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But I also produce another sugar, and I know we're talking about honey, but I just want to add that right now it's maple syrup season here on the island and lower mainland. Big leaf maple syrup is in full production. So the chef there, I don't know if he's ever come across any big leaf maple syrup to try.
I'm going to guess so.
I love it, Bill. Yeah, one of my favorite BC ingredients.
Yeah.
Bill, what a great plug for maple syrup from the island. Thank you very much for the call.
Yeah.
And I love the description, right, of what it takes for him to be out there with the bees. Julie writes, quick question. I love creamed honey, but I have to struggle to not eat it by the spoonful. Yeah, I would too. Could I seed organic clear honey with creamed honey to get it more creamed? Is that something I guess she would like more of it.
To get it more creamed? I'm not sure.
Okay. Julie, you're on a mission to find ways to get more creamed honey. Chef Ned Bell is here with me. We have a couple of minutes, and we have the final product of his warm salad drizzled with a honey dressing, a warm dressing, a nutty dressing. There's the hazelnuts being drizzled, being sprinkled on top now. I see some cherry tomatoes, and this is with bread. It's kind of a bread salad. Look at it. It's almost like bread pudding. Yeah. And which I do love very much.
This would be a great side dish for any protein that you might want. But I'll share this with you, Michelle, if you want, and whoever else wants to try the recipe. It'll be available soon, and I think it's pretty delicious.
NedBell.com. Little plug there. Chef Ned Bell, he's, of course, many things, but also the chef ambassador for Buy BC throughout the province and for the Ministry of Agriculture. Still great to have you.
Thank you, Michelle.
And you've done it. You've cooked on the radio.
What a thrill to be on TV as well. It's my first time ever on being on CBC TV, so thrilled about that.
You're our second guest. It's our second
Very
day.
good.
Very good to have you. Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone who called it as well.
Get some of the cabbage.
That is it for our show. Thank you so much for calling in, joining the discussion. You can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. You can listen again on the CBC Listen app. Watch us again on demand on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. You can watch Chef Ned Bell make his wonderful salad once again. I'm Michelle Eliot. I'm going to try this salad now. Thanks so much for joining us on BC Today. Have a great afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow.